Welcome to the latest installment of the 30-Minute Workout Series. My name is Jeff Bartels. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Jerry Bartels, Angel Espinosa, and Alan Gilbert. In today's session, we are going to be looking at some tips and tricks that are focused on Civil 3D cross-sections. If you're unfamiliar with the 30-minute workout concept, I'm sure you'll agree if you've ever taken a training course before, there's never enough time to cover everything that an application has to offer. Usually there's just enough time to cover the need-to-know functionality. All the other tools and features, workflows, things like that are the type of thing that you just have to pick up on your own over a career using the application. The purpose for us putting together these sessions is to give us an opportunity to demonstrate some of these lesser discussed tools and provide a resource for folks such that they can shorten up the learning curve and make the most of their Autodesk investment. We do have some ground rules for the sessions. Many of the examples that we show are going to be abstract in nature. We do that on purpose. This way we can focus solely on how a tool works. Once you understand how a tool works, you can use it in whatever situation works best for you. Since we're only together for half an hour, our goal is to always start on time and end on time. You don't have to worry about taking notes. These sessions are always recorded. Anybody who has registered for the session will get access to a recording. Jerry, Alan, and Angel are going to be fielding questions as we go. If you have questions, please put those in the Q&A pane. That is the most efficient way for them to find and answer those questions. One more thing, if you'd like to have a one-on-one follow-up call with any one of us regarding the topics that we cover during these sessions, please put that in the Q&A pane as well. We'll get that scheduled. We always enjoy speaking with other users. The agenda for today's session, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, all related to cross-sections, looking at a bunch of areas, everything from creation, organization, updating, labeling, and I've got extras on there as well. Since we're going to be looking at a lot of topics, we're going to be using a shotgun approach to get through as much information as possible. At the end of the session, I'm going to be sharing some additional resources in the event you'd like to take a deeper dive look at some of the topics that we've discussed today, and some additional topics are included in those additional resources. As always, this is going to be a PowerPoint-free zone. We'll be working live in the application for the duration of our time together. All right, let's drop out of this. Let me start by mentioning that I am working in Civil 3D 2022.1. However, everything that we look at today is going to work for you so long as you're using a contemporary version of Civil 3D, all the way back to 2018. On my screen, I've got a drawing that represents a portion of a proposed roadway design. Let's do a quick tour on this. If I zoom in, we can see I've got an alignment called Main Street. I've got an existing ground surface called EG. If I pan the drawing up, you can see that I've pulled a surface profile for Main Street, and I've created a finished ground profile for that as well. If we pan this over, you can see the assembly that I'm using. This represents the typical section for my roadway design. That assembly was used to build this corridor model. And then I have also placed some sample lines for the purpose of creating cross sections. And I'd like to create my cross sections now. To do that, I'll come up to the Home ribbon tab, and in the Profile and Section Views panel, we'll open Section Views, and I'll choose Create Multiple Views. I'd like to create my section views from using the Main Street alignment and the Main Street sample line group. For the section view style, I'm going to choose a plottable style. These will be suitable for printed sheets. Let's click Next. I'm going to pull these using the production method. This will organize them based on how many will fit nicely on each sheet. Since I'm using production, I would then navigate my hard drive to locate a Civil 3D template. I've already done that. And that template includes a layout that is suitable for cross sections. And these are suitable for cross sections at 1 inch equals 10 feet. Let's click OK. For my group plot style, I'm going to choose the plottable version. The group plot style controls the orientation of the sections into columns and rows, controls the distance between them. Let's click Next. For offset range, I'm going to keep the automatic setting. For the width, we'll keep for elevation the automatic setting for the height. Under the station or the section display options, we can see the two items that I've sampled here, the existing ground surface and the corridor. I can choose to draw those. I've also got styles assigned. Right now, the surface is going to look like an existing ground style, and then I've got a code set style for the corridor that's called Autodesk Sections Plot. Let's click Next. Finally, we get to the data bands. I am going to pick a band set. Now, the band set places labels at the bottom of the section view, and this particular label set is only labeling the offsets. It can also label surface elevations, but I'm not using those, so these are kind of irrelevant in this case. Let's choose Create Section Views, and I will click to place these over to the right. And when I do, right now we can see that they're the wrong size. If you look down here at the bottom right of the screen, you can see that this drawing is set to 50 scale. Now, typically, I pull my cross sections in a separate file that's designated for 1" = 10 feet. Just for the purpose of speed, we're going to pull these in the same file as my design. So let me flip this to 1" = 10. And when I do, we can see that that corrects the size of the sections. However, they're still spaced incorrectly. They're spaced based on that 50 scale setting. To fix that, I can grab one of the section views and then I can come up and choose Update Group Layout. This will reapply the group plot style based on the new scale. And I can see that my sections here fit nicely on 3 sheets. If I zoom in, these sections are obviously a roadway design. However, you may pull cross sections that represent a floodway or a stream or a river, something like that, something hydrological in nature. Many times, hydrology sections will be represented such that the stationing goes downstream, but you are viewing each section view looking upstream. So that would mean reversing the view of each of these section views. We can do that now. That started in 2016. To flip the direction, we can do that as part of the section view style. If I select the section view, for example, and right click, I can go to Edit Section View Style, and I can see the properties. Now, typically you'd create a new style for this, but I'm just going to flip these. If I go to the Graph tab, there's an option here now for section view direction. I could set that to right to left. And it might be a little hard to read. We can see the daylight here on the right side, 860.65. If I flip these and zoom in, you can see that 880.65 is now here on the left. In fact, you can also see it's flipped because the offsets, the positives, are here on the left side. So if you have to create reversed sections or right to left, we can do it that way. I'm going to flip things back the way they were. I'll select one of these section views. I'll right click, go to Edit Section View Style, and we'll put these back to left to right. Let's zoom out. Now, another component that we have in the section view style is the grid. We can see that I've got a grid displaying on each of these section views. Notice this boundary. This boundary represents the limits of our printable sheet. This boundary is a property or a component of our group plot style. Maybe I would like to have one common grid for all of these sections. I'd like to have a grid that covers this entire area. The group plot style also supports a grid setting. If I select this boundary, for instance, and right click and go into Edit Group Plot Style, if I go to the Display tab, from here, I can turn on grid components. Let's click, now if I click Apply, we can see those. Now, if you want to adjust the properties of the spacing of your grid, you would do that under Plot Area. There's the horizontal and vertical, major and minor here to control that grid. Let me click OK. Now, at this point, I've got redundant grid. In this case, I've got additional grid on these sections. If I want to practice good form, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the grid as part of the section view. I'll do that by selecting the section. I'll right click and go to Edit Section View Style. And then on the Display tab, we'll find the components here. I will turn the grid off for this style. Okay, let's pan this over. On occasion, you may be working on your section views and maybe you get to a special section. Maybe it's a driveway or a utility crossing, something like that. Maybe it would be helpful for you to view that particular area in your model. Civil 3D makes it possible for us to jump from the section views to the model or to the sample lines, if you will. If I select the section view as an example and right click, there's an option here, Zoom to Sample Line. And I can see that takes me right to that sample line at station 6+00. We can also do the reverse. As you're working on your model, you may get to a sample line that's at a location of interest, a driveway, utility crossing, something like that, and you may wish to view the section. If I select the sample line and right click, there's an option here that I can zoom right to the section view. Let's back up. We'll talk for a second about controlling the display of the items in our section views. Section views work just like profile views, same thing. And now in this case, I've got a section view here. Maybe I'd like to adjust the display of either the surface or the corridor. If I select the section view and come up to the contextual ribbon, there's an option here, Section View Properties. If I select that, we have several tabs. If we go to the Sections tab here, I can see the data that was sampled, the surface and the corridor. I can choose to draw this or not. If I turn that off and click Apply, you can see that's off. Let's turn that back on. I can also come down and adjust the style of the items that I've sampled. We'll make that surface look proposed. You can see the difference on screen. I'm going to flip that back the way it was. And I'll click apply and OK. Now, I could do that on a station by station basis, or I can also make adjustments globally. To make global adjustments, I'll select one of these views and I'll come up to the contextual ribbon and I'll choose View Group Properties. This allows me to make my changes to the entire group. Once again, I'll go to the Sections tab and you can see a very similar dialog box here. I can maybe turn off that existing ground surface. When I click apply, you can see how it's now hidden on all of these. Let's turn that back on. Maybe I'd like to change the style for the corridor. I'll flip this to a different code set style. I'll grab one called corridor and click OK. When I click apply, you can see how that updates in all of the views. Let's flip this back, the original setting, and I'll click apply. So I could do it one at a time, or I could do it to everybody. What if I wanted to take a hybrid approach? What if I wanted to make adjustments that only applied to multiple, but I don't want to take and individually click on each one. If I select a section view and go back to View Group Properties, here on the Sections tab, there's a toggle down at the bottom called Show Sections for All Sources. What this does, if I collapse this will show me the items that are sampled, and I've got global settings here. But if I expand these, it will show me every section view where this particular item is displayed. And then I've got display properties here as well. So I've got stations 5 and 6 right there. If I wanted to turn this off just in stations 5 and 6, I can click apply. You can see the change. If I wanted to adjust my corridor, for instance, for stations 5 and 6, I would come down and adjust the properties of those. So it represents a dialog box, kind of a one-stop shop where I can go in and make these changes. And then I can also use this. The very first one represents a global setting. So where this says varies now, I could flip this back to its original setting. So that's another way that we can make adjustments to the section views. Let's turn this off. And before I jump out of this dialog box, I'm going to change the code set style on all of these. I'm going to use this code set style called Plot Extra Labels. We'll apply that to all of them. If I zoom in, you can see that this code set style includes several labels. In fact, so many that they're starting to encroach on each other. We can, ever since Civil 3D 2016, we have the ability now to create staggered labels. Now, we could create staggered labels before, just surfaces and things like that. The staggered labels never really applied to the stuff that was coming in the code set style. So let's look at how we can do staggered labels now with the code set. First, we'll do just a quick description of the code set style. The code set style controls the appearance of the geometry that we see and all of the labels. Let's take a look at the code set style that's being used in this cross section. If I select that and right click, I can come down and choose Edit Code Set Style. The code set style is made up of points, links, and shapes. The points represent all of the endpoints or vertices that we see that make up this geometry. These points are coded. For instance, there's a point right here called crown. There's a point here at the edge called edge of traveled way. There's one here called daylight. These points create the longitudinal geometry of our corridor model. These points, since they're coded, it makes it easy for us to apply labeling. If I expand the point category here, I can see all of the point codes. You can see crown has a label. Daylight has a label. We can also see that here on screen. Let's take a look at the label for a second. I'm going to click on the label property here and we'll click Edit. If you remember, a few weeks ago, we went through creating label styles. This is identical to what we looked at back then. There are 3 components in this label. It's a line component, an offset label, and an elevation label. 3 components. Let's close this. We'll jump out of this. So with the code set style, the labels, they won't stagger. That's just a property of the code set. But in 2016, if I go to the Settings tab, if I open up the section category and go to label styles, there is a label style now called corridor points. This allows us to label those corridor points using a tool that will conform to staggering. If I expand this, I've already created a label style for that. I'm just going to double click so we can see the label style. If I roll my mouse wheel forward, we can see it. Basically, I just replicated in this style what we saw in the other style. I've got 3 components: line, offset, and elevation. Let's close this. So how do we stagger the labels? I will add them to a label set, just like we do with a profile. Here under section, under label sets, I do have a couple here. I'm going to create one from scratch. I'll just right click on this and say new. I will create this, or I'll call this label set staggered labels. And on the labels tab for type, if I expand this, you can see the different types of labels, same ones that we see here. I'm going to select corridor points, and then I will grab the style that I'd like to use, basically the same style that we just looked at a second ago, right there. Click add. So I'm adding that to my set. This will be the only thing in this set for right now. I will then come down to stagger, and I'll say I'd like to stagger this in both directions. And then I've got 2 stagger measurements. I'm going to set the first one to 0.1. I'll set the second one to 0.15. You can experiment with these measurements if you want to. Basically, these are vertical measurements, meaning that when the label comes out, the first measurement, it'll go up 1/10 of an inch. That's the printed size. And then it'll stagger left or right. And then the elevational difference between the start point of that staggered line and the end point will measure 0.15. So there's my label set. Let me click OK. Now all I have to do is apply the label set to this group. Knowing what we know now, I can grab one of these, go to View Group Properties. And here on the Sections tab, here's where we applied the code set style. So the way this works, the code set style is going to determine which points are labeled. The label set is going to determine what that label style looks like, and that's what's going to allow it to stagger. Let me click in label set here, and I will choose that staggered labels label set, and I'll click OK, and then I'll click OK. And then one more thing. If you remember, these sections existed already. I didn't set this up ahead of time and then pull the sections staggered. So what ends up happening here, since I already had existing sections, I've actually got 2 sets of labels. I've got the labels with the code set style, and I've got the labels that came along with the label set. I need to tell Civil 3D what method I'd like to use. There is a command called corridor section labels convert. This is how I can dictate which method to use for these section views. So corridor section labels convert. It says, which section views do you want to convert? I'll type all, and I'll press enter twice. Now that they're all selected, I can come down and determine what method do I want to use. Do I want to use the brand new corridor points, or do I want to use the code set style approach? I want to use the corridor points. And then it's going to make me pick my label set again, and I'll click OK. Now I can see that I have staggered labels. If you wanted to set something like that up in your template, if we go to the settings tab here, and I expand the section view group, this is where I can find the commands for creating section views. I'm going to come down to create multiple section views. Let me double click on that. That was the command I used to make these. If we go to section view creation, right here is where I can tell it what method I want it to use. Section code set style is the old way. Section label set is the new way. So I would pick that here. And then under default styles, as long as I'm doing it, I could say, hey, this is the label set I want to use on these staggered labels. So if I did that, the next time I pulled a group, it would take care of all of that for me. So that would be something you would apply in your template. But right now I'm going to click cancel, and let's look at this. I have 2 labels here at all of my crown locations. Now, why is that? If I pan this over to my assembly, I'm going to flip the scale for a second to make this easier to see. When you create your assembly, in this case, I added a lane on the right and a lane on the left. Each of these lines, or each of these lane objects, had a point code at this corner. If I hover, you can see that's the crown. If I hover over the point, we can see that point code is crown. So I've actually got 2 crown points at this location. I actually have 2 longitudinal feature lines defining the crown of the road. That's why it's labeling both. I only need 1. To get rid of one of those, I'm going to select this lane, and then I will come over to my properties. And for inside point code, I am going to set that to none. I don't want to use the point code for the right side, just use the point code for the left side. Let's zoom out, and I will flip my scale back. We'll pan the drawing over. I will select the corridor as I go by. And then let's zoom in. Now the corridor is selected. I'm going to come up and choose Rebuild Corridor. And when I do, if you watch those center labels, you can see now I just have a single label because now I only have one feature line there. That's how I would make that adjustment. Let's talk about this boundary. This is our section view buffer. This came out in 2018. This is used in the event we have manually created geometry in our sections. For example, you may create some labels. I may go to annotate here, for instance. Let's create a multi-leader. From the endpoint here, we'll pull this down, and I'll type concrete walk. I'll drag the arrow to give myself some word wrap. And then maybe I've got some additional geometry here. I'm going to draw a circle. Now I'm horribly old-fashioned. If I type circle there, we can click and create that. And then I'm going to create a revision cloud just to create some manual geometry on the section view. This boundary acts just like a crossing window selection. If you remember way back when we started these 30-minute workout sessions, we talked about different ways to select. A crossing window selection allows you to select objects that fall completely within the window or cross over the boundary. And that's what I have here. So the way this works, if I move the section view, and once again, I'm old-fashioned, I'm just going to type M and hit enter for move. I'll select this, and then I'll pick it up. And if I move it over here, you can see all of that stuff went along for the ride. Let's undo. Another way you can move a section is by selecting it, and there's a grip down here. It's treated like a handle. I can use that to move that around. Let's undo. These section view buffers have grips so that you can expand or contract them such that they can get around the manual items that you have created. And it's just a really nice tool if you do create manual geometry and things shift around, that makes sure that everything stays together. Now, a big instance where things shift around is if I have to insert a new section into a section view group. Historically, that was very painful to do. Now it's actually quite easy. Let's insert a new section view in between 5 and 6. I'm going to start by selecting number 5. I'll right click and let's go to zoom to sample line. Let's change the scale here for a second to make this easier to see. So there's my sample line at 5. I'd like to make a new sample line here to pull another section. So we'll go back to the home tab. I'll choose sample lines. I'll select my alignment. And it's allowing me to add a sample line to my current group, which is exactly what I want. I'm just going to pick a point here on screen. And then I'll hit enter a couple times to accept the default width. I'll press enter again to get out of the command. So there's my brand new sample line. Let's change my scale. We'll head back over to these sections and we'll create that section view down here. I'll do that by going to section views and I'll choose create section view. I just want to make one this time. And same dialog box. I'm going to say I just want to make a section view for that brand new sample line that we made. Looking at the styles here, this looks good. Offset, elevation, style. I want to make sure this is set to plot extra labels. Data bands, good. Create section view. Let me click. Oh, forgot the stagger. Let's do that. Corridor section labels convert. I would also want to go through and make that adjustment that we saw earlier in the settings. I'd want to do that for the single sections as well. So I selected the one, corridor sections convert. I picked this one is the only one I want to change. I want to use the new method. I will then pick my staggered labels label set, and now I can see that. Now, if I want to slip this into the group, very easy now. I can select it, and then I can come up and choose move to section view group. And then I've only got one group in this case, so it makes it easy. I'm going to click OK. And when it slips in there, you can see that it pushed this one up, and all of those manual items are still registered exactly where they were in the previous configuration. And if necessary, if you added a bunch of these, it'll just start adding additional sheets. So it makes it really nice now if we need to add items to section views. Okay, looks like we've got time for one more thing. Let's say that I'd like to show some right-of-way labels here in these section views. That's common to do. I'm going to pan the drawing over, and I will flip my scale back just to make this a little easier to see. I'm going to generate my right-of-way geometry as offset alignments. I'll do that by selecting this alignment, and then I'll come up to the contextual ribbon and I'll choose offset alignment. I would like to make an alignment on the left, 50-foot offset, and on the right, 50-foot offset. This way, they'll be easy to see. We'll choose a style. We'll choose the proposed right-of-way style, and I don't need labels on these. Since these represent property, I don't need the proposed profile with those. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and you can see those two alignments representing my right-of-way. Now, if I was to simply display these alignments in my section views, what elevation would they be? They'd be 0, essentially, because these alignments have no elevation. What I'm going to do is pull a surface profile for each of these. And the surface profile will then, it'll give me a place that I can set the marker. The marker will be placed at the elevation, in this case, of the existing ground surface. That's where I'm going. So let's pull a surface profile for this one. If I select the one here on the north, from the contextual ribbon, I'll choose surface profile. I'm going to sample my existing ground. And I'll click OK. I don't need to draw this in a view. I just want to sample the surface. I will then press escape, and we'll get the one here to the south. We'll pull a surface profile through the existing ground. I'll click OK. Perfect. One more thing. Let's talk about the marker. I have created a block. I have a block in this file. Since I'm old-fashioned, I'm just going to type insert to bring up the dialog box. And if I look at the current drawing, I'm going to do a filter here for right away. I'm going to put an asterisk in front of and behind that. It'll find all blocks containing that string, regardless of what they start with or end with. I've got a block here for the left side right away, or symbol, and I've got a block for the right side. I'll click one of these and then I'll place it on screen just so we can see it. So that's all I did. I drew this at the size I wanted that to appear on the printed sheet. If I select it, you can see my insertion point. It's down here. This way, when it's placed at the surface elevation, it'll have a little bit of a gap there. So that's all I did. I'll select this and I'll press delete. Once I created that block, I came over to General, Multipurpose Styles, Marker Styles, and I made a marker style out of this. You can see that I've got a marker style for proposed right-of-way left and proposed right-of-way right. If I double click to open the one on the left, here's where I gave it a name. For marker, I said, use that block, use the left block. And then for the scale, I said, use drawing scale. And then I set the height, the inches here. It should be 1.5 inches tall when it's placed on the section views. Finally, I went to display. And I said, if this marker is ever displayed in a cross section, these are the properties that I want it to have. So I did that to create a marker for left and right. All right. Knowing that, let me set my scale here back to 10. And let's try this. To display my right-of-way markers, I will select one of these section views and I'll go up to View Group Properties. If I go to the Section Views tab, there is a column here called Profile Grade. I'm going to click the ellipsis button, open that up. From here, I can select an alignment. I'm going to choose right-of-way right, and I'll also choose right-of-way left. I would like to show both of those items. I would like to show the profile for those. Now, it's only got one profile. If I had multiple, I could pick those. So this is the existing ground profile for each of those. Now, what marker do I want? This is the right side. I'm going to use my proposed right marker. And this is the left side. I'm going to use my proposed left marker. When I'm finished, I'll click OK and OK. If I zoom in, you can see the markers now display in all the section views. And if I open my in-canvas menu here, I'm going to change my viewport configuration. We'll split the screen such that I have a horizontal boundary. Let's zoom in on one of these. We'll pan over here just so that I can show you that this is a dynamic relationship. If I drag this alignment out and do a quick regen, you can see how that updates. Now I'm doing this with right-of-way or with alignment profile that represents right-of-way, but you could do it for anything. So this makes a nice dynamic tool that I can, as I make the changes here, it will automatically update my sections. Okay, dangerously close. Let me jump back to my PowerPoint here. So we talked about a lot of things today, looking at a lot of areas having to do with sections. Let me show you the additional resources. Over the years, we have created several videos that we've posted to YouTube that cover cross sections in much more detail. If you want, take a screenshot of this and you can find the videos based on these titles. Eventually, this recording will be posted to YouTube, and when it is, there'll be hyperlinks to all of these in the description. Just based on where we are for time, let me say that if there are any questions that have gone unanswered at this point, we will get back to you with an answer. On behalf of Jerry Bartels, Angel Espinosa, Alan Gilbert, and myself, I want to say thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your time. We hope you find value in these sessions, and we look forward to seeing you guys again at the next 30-minute workout. Thanks.